Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, today we are diving into the absolute ultimate political matchup, the U.S. House of Representatives going head-to-head with the U.S. Senate. You see, the United States Congress makes the federal laws that govern your taxes, your rights, and really, your daily life. But did you know that Congress is actually bicameral? That just means it's split into two completely distinct groups. They share the U.S. Capitol building, sure, but they operate in very, very different ways. And today, we're putting them in the ring together.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for judging the lower house against the upper house. Number 1, the Great Compromise. 2, Tale of the Tape. 3, Rules of Engagement. 4, Exclusive Powers. And 5, the Legislative Legacy.
Round 1, if you will. The Great Compromise. The origin of the rivalry. So to really understand why we even have two chambers, we've got to travel all the way back to 1787, to the incredibly intense Constitutional Convention. This massive debate broke out over state representation, and it was basically a heavyweight battle of large states versus small states. Delegates from the bigger states argued that, hey, because they contributed proportionally more in taxes and resources, they absolutely deserve proportionally more representation in Congress. Makes sense, right? But on the flip side, delegates from the smaller states were terrified of having their voices completely drowned out. They argued fiercely that all states should just be equally represented, no matter their size. And this disagreement literally almost tore the brand new nation apart.
But thankfully, Founding Fathers Roger Sherman and Oliver Ellsworth came to the rescue with a brilliant solution. Look at how tight this timeline was. After months of just raging debate in early 1787, delegates finally started coming around to the Sherman-Ellsworth plan right around July 4th. This plan called for an upper house with equal representation and a lower house with proportional representation. Then on July 16th, the Great Compromise was officially adopted. But get this, by a margin of just one single vote. Crazy, right? Without that one pivotal vote, there likely wouldn't even be a U.S. Constitution today.
Real quick, before we step into the ring for the next round of our matchup, if you're enjoying this breakdown, please take a quick second to like, share, and subscribe to The Explainer so we can keep bringing you these deep dives. Moving right along to Part 2, Tale of the Tape, by the numbers.
All right, it is time to look at the hard numbers and the basic stats that govern exactly who gets into each chamber. The House of Representatives is huge. We're talking 435 members, and they serve these very short 2-year terms. They only need to be 25 years old and a citizen for 7 years. Because of those short 2-year terms, House members are basically constantly campaigning for re-election. Now contrast that with the Senate, just 100 members serving lengthy 6-year terms. They have to be at least 30 years old and a citizen for 9 years. And this brilliantly illustrates a major difference. Those 6-year terms give senators so much more room to breathe and focus on long-term goals rather than constantly worrying about immediate re-election.
Because of that great compromise we just talked about, the representation numbers look vastly different in practice. A House member represents, on average, about 761,000 people in a specific, single-member district. Meanwhile, a senator represents their entire state, which averages out to about 3.4 million people. But there are some wild exceptions to this. Take a low-population state like Wyoming, for example. The whole state is just one House district. So that means a senator in Wyoming actually represents only about 289,000 people. That's way fewer than your average House member.
So you might be wondering, how do we actually decide who gets those 435 House seats? Well, that brings us to a really critical concept called apportionment. Every 10 years, a national census documents the country's population changes. And based on that fresh, updated data, those 435 House seats get redistributed. So, faster-growing states like Texas and Florida recently will actually gain seats in power in the House, while slower-growing states will end up losing them.
Now, once those seats are apportioned, state legislatures have to redraw their congressional district boundaries. And oh boy, this leads to a highly controversial practice known as gerrymandering. State legislators can get incredibly creative here, manipulating those exact boundaries specifically to keep their own political party in power. Why does this matter to you? Well, because of gerrymandering, turnover in the House is surprisingly low, which means your local elections might be a lot less competitive than you think. The Senate, though, they don't have districts, so they don't have to deal with gerrymandering at all.
Part 3, Rules of Engagement. Passing the laws.
So how do these two completely different bodies actually manage to work together and turn a bill into a federal law? Honestly, the process is notoriously long. Any member can introduce a bill. Then it gets assigned to a committee, where, frankly, most bills just die. But if it survives, it's voted on by the floor. If it passes there, the entire process repeats itself over in the other chamber. And often they pass different versions, so they have to actually sit down and work together to sort out the differences. Only when both houses approve the exact same version does it finally go to the president's desk. Oh, and if the president vetoes it, the only way that bill becomes law is if both chambers override the veto with a very difficult 2/3 majority vote. Because the House has 435 members in the room, its culture is entirely different from the Senate. Power in the House is highly centralized. It's very top-down. They rely on incredibly strict rules, managed by the powerful Rules Committee, and those rules dictate exactly what gets presented. This leaves very little time for true debate. The Senate, however, is a much slower process. Members are constantly competing against each other for power, and they take their time hashing out every last detail through extensive debate. Have you ever looked at Washington and just wondered why nothing seems to get done? Well, that extensive debate brings us to the famous filibuster. Over in the Senate, a filibuster is any action meant to delay the passing of a law. To stop a filibuster and finally force a vote, the Senate needs what's called a cloture, which requires 60 votes. This means a minority in the Senate hold incredible power. Actually, senators can even use a silent filibuster, where they literally just don't show up to prevent a cloture, which means debates often don't even get started in the first place. Quick timeout. If this explainer is helping you make sense of things, definitely hit that subscribe button. We absolutely love bringing you these deep dives here on The Explainer, and your support means everything as we head into the final rounds.
Let's get into Part 4, Exclusive Powers and Perks, the Special Abilities.
Now, what's really interesting about this is that the Constitution didn't just split the legislative branch in half. It gave each chamber very specific, totally unique abilities. The House has the power of the purse, the ability to initiate impeachments, and the incredibly rare power to choose the president if no candidate gets an electoral college majority, which, by the way, has only happened twice in all of U.S. history. On the flip side, the Senate has massive influence on foreign affairs because they exclusively approve treaties. They also hold the actual impeachment trials, and they get the absolute final say in approving all presidential appointments. Let's clarify that impeachment process for a second, because it confuses a lot of people. Impeach simply means charging someone in public office with a crime. That's it. The House investigates and votes. If a majority agrees, the official is impeached. But again, that just means they're charged. The real trouble happens over in the Senate. The Senate holds the actual trial, and it requires a supermajority, a full 2/3 vote, to actually convict and remove that public official from office. But the House definitely has a legendary trump card of its own. As one representative proudly noted in our source material, any revenue bill, any tax bill, any budget bill, that starts with us, baby. This is the legendary power of the purse. Basically, if a piece of legislation is going to ask the American taxpayers for money, it absolutely must originate in the House of Representatives.
And finally, Part 5, the legislative legacy, two halves of a whole.
So despite all their differences, they really are two halves of one whole. But over the centuries, a very clear philosophical split has emerged. The House of Representatives is known as the lower house. Because they face the voters every 2 years, they view themselves as way more accountable, deeply obligated to listen to the people, and truly representative of the everyday citizen. The Senate, however, is the upper house. They carry a lot more prestige, they value deep tradition and continuity, and they generally view their 6-year terms as a way to kind of rise above the daily drama of the lower house.
But you know, despite all their bickering, their different terms, and their unique powers, they are brothers in the exact same branch of government. They even share the exact same base salary of $174,000 a year. And most importantly, when the nation faces its absolute darkest hours, they share the grave, unified power to declare war. Neither can do it alone.
We really hope you've enjoyed this matchup. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to The Explainer so we can keep learning all this stuff together. I want to leave you with a provocative question to chew on. Does the Great Compromise still work for us today? Or do you think one of these chambers holds a little too much power over the other? If you really want to find out more, I highly dare you to go read Article 1 of the Constitution for yourself. Thanks so much for joining us on The Explainer, and we will catch you next time.